Hey pedal people, this is my bass pedalboard rundown for 2025, and I thought I'd do an updated video on this because I'm actually playing bass in a band right now. We're in the process of writing a bunch of music, and up till now I've actually been carrying around some pedals to rehearsal in like a backpack, which was getting pretty old, so I figured I'd actually nail down a bass board that'd fit the kind of music we've been writing. I'm pretty excited because if you've seen my last bass board rundown, this board is gonna look probably pretty different, so I guess we'll just get into it. Real quick before we jump into the pedal stuff, I want to give you a bit of info about my bass rig for some context. I play a Fender PJ Mustang bass, and I love this thing. It's short scale, the P pickup is really thumpy, it's very easy to play, sounds awesome, I love this bass. Then I have my newest acquisition actually, which is the orange Bass Terror, and this is a hybrid solid state with a preamp tube situation going on. I don't know, it sounds awesome. And that's running through my Ampeg 210 cab, which I've had for a really long time, but honestly I don't think I'm a big fan of how it sounds. I think eventually I'll end up getting like a 115 or something like that. Definitely open to recommendations if you guys have them. But the 210 is sounding okay for now, so we're rolling with it. And the kind of music that me and my band are playing is kind of hard to pin down, but it's like psychedelic, folk-inspired, punk-inspired, like alternative rock stuff. We're doing stuff that sounds like the 70s, so there's that. And then my pedal goals with my pedal board is number one, to be a solid foundational tone, so I want pedals that are going to enhance the sound of my bass into my amp. And then I also want it to be very minimal but also fun, so I don't want it to be like utility only stuff. I want to like have at least one thing on here that I can turn on and like, you know, crack a smile. So there's that. And then the last thing I want is to have it be very simplistic and easy to operate when I'm playing live. I don't want to worry about like stacking or gain staging dirt pedals and like getting perfect flavors and working with EQs and all that. I want it to be as simple as possible for my stupid multitasking brain to operate when we're playing live. So yeah, those are the criteria for my bass pedal, my bass board. And now we'll jump into picking out the pedals I'm going to use. So first, I knew I wanted modulation on here, not because I use modulation a whole ton, but because I think it's a fun and interesting way to add a hint of variety to the sound. So because of that, for this space on the board, I was looking for something that could do very subtle really well. And at first I was leaning towards chorus because I love that post-punk bass sound, but I've actually landed on vibrato, and I've chosen the Boss VB2W. Because again, like I said, I'm going for a more minimal approach to how I want the bass to sound, and I think it's a cool way to add a bit of warp without fully like taking over with modulation. Especially on my more melodic lines, it creates a really nice effect. It's also pretty trippy because our guitarist's primary mod is phaser, and the interaction of like phased guitar with pitch vibrato on the bass makes things sound pretty darn wobbly. What I like about the VB2 is its simplicity and overall just really good sound. I do wish sometimes that I could dial the rate in a bit slower, but if you set the rise time control low enough, it kind of helps keep the feeling of being too wobbly under control. And also a great feature is the bypass and latch options. And in latch mode, even when the pedal's off, it's adding a slight coloration and kind of boost to the tone. And then vice versa, when it's in bypass mode, every time you turn it on, it's going to add that kind of coloration to the sound. So that's a neat way to kind of use it as sort of like a preamp pedal, if you will. It adds a little bit of character on its own, and then depending on if you have it in latch or bypass mode, I can add that preamp sound on demand or just keep it on, and then that's like a cool little way to add some extra flavor to my sound. And that's also why I have it up here in the front of the chain, because one, vibrato is slightly more subtle before dirt. I didn't want it to get too warpy if I placed it later in the chain. And number two, because I can actually use it to kind of boost the dirt pedals a little bit if I ever needed to. Also, the way that vibratos sound to me reminds me of like that nostalgic sort of feeling. So anytime I use it, especially on my more melodic lines, I think it sounds pretty cool and adds like an extra bit of dimension. So yeah, this is one of my favorite vibrato pedals, and it's been working really well for the kind of stuff that we're doing. Next, for my dirt pedal spot, I'm going with the Spruce Effects Gale pedal, and this has been a long-time favorite drive for me on bass. Even though it's not marketed as a bass pedal, I find it keeps the transient attack clearer than a lot of other fuzz pedals, and that helps a ton in maintaining the bass's clarity and punch, which is super important to me. I've thrown this pedal on bass on recordings nearly pretty much every time I want a more distorted or like ragged sound in the mix, and it's never disappointed. It always seems to fit in really nicely, and I don't ever have to EQ out excessive lows or worry about the mids like disappearing. So since I love this pedal so much in a recorded mix, I thought I'd throw it on my live board and see how it goes. And so far, so good. The clarity translates really well live, and my bass doesn't get lost when I turn it on, which is great. Granted, I'm not using it like a full-blown fuzz pedal, and this thing has a lot of gain, so you can, because technically this pedal is a fuzz pedal, but it has a ton of range, so you can use it like an overdrive or like a fuzz distortion, or melt people's faces off. But obviously I am using it in the most boring way possible as a standard overdrive with a bit of texture to it. But besides the tone control working like a rat, which if you're familiar with that, basically it's like a low pass filter, and the more you turn it up, the more highs you're attenuating. So besides kind of the coolness of that tone control, there's also the shape control, which I find really interesting. It's basically, as it says, it shapes the character of the fuzz to be either more woolly and beefy, or kind of sharp and biting and aggressive sounding. So I'm using this as my main fuzzy overdrive tone for our heavier stuff and our like punky sounding songs. It's got a really nice natural EQ to it, a good texture that helps the bass stand out, and that touch responsive feeling that makes it very pleasantly dynamic to play. Up next is the tuner, and it's an absolutely essential pedal for me. Up till now I was using a clip-on tuner for my bass, and I'm not a huge fan of that, so it's nice to finally have a tuner on the board now. To be honest, I got this Walrus one specifically because the orientation can be flipped, and also because I'm a huge sucker for the screensaver gimmick. I've uploaded a few graphics and my own drawings to it, and it honestly just brings me joy to look at and customize it. But I can also see, like, in the future having it display the set list, which could be actually useful. I also like that the display is really big and bright, and it makes it easy to go in the menus and change settings and stuff. My band tunes to 432, and I like that it displays that right on the front. So yeah, I'm enjoying this tuner. It's fun, it's cool, it's customizable, and it's a good tuner. Next, to fill the Wildcard slot, because this is kind of an extra spot on my board and anything could go here, but I'm choosing the Caroline Kilobyte delay, which has been a longtime favorite on bass for me. Not that I use delay a whole ton, but there's some good opportunities in the music we've been writing for a little spaciness here and there. I know a lot of bassists prefer a tap tempo delay, but I haven't found that to be bothersome so far because I use delay more like a subtle slapback sort of sound and basically set and forget once I found the sweet spot. Also, the ability to dial in the grittiness of the repeats on the Kilobyte helps the echoes kind of fade more into the background instead of like being a defined echo, so it's not really affecting the rhythm for me. It's not like messing me up or like, you know, getting in the way of the guitars and stuff. I guess I think of it more kind of like a reverb type effect, except I just kind of like the Kilobyte more than any other reverb I've tried, on bass at least. It fills some space when I'm doing like galloping rhythm stuff, and it can add a little interest to sparser melodic lines, especially like with that grit I mentioned earlier. It's a pretty neat texture and fades into the background and doesn't stand out necessarily. I've also been using it for some noise making with the Havoc switch, which I find super cool. Holding it down ramps the delays up into self-oscillation, and I think it's really fun to use like at the culmination of a section when you build a bunch of noise up before like a drop, or just for like dramatic effect or stuff like that. It's just a really fun pedal, sounds great, and I've used it a ton on bass, and I will continue to use it more on bass. Then the EQ/DI, well, I've only got one choice for this because I haven't had a need to get anything else, and that is the Tech 21 Sans Amp Bass Driver DI. I've seen this pedal as a staple on a lot of bass boards, and I think it's for a good reason. I think it sounds great as a DI. It has a very powerful EQ section, and I personally really like the drive with the blend on it. It's my base level of like drive tone shaping, and I'm taking advantage of the powerful EQ to kind of help accentuate the percussive sound that I'm going for. I dial in the mids pretty heavy, and it helps me carve out a nice space in the mix and add some grit, And if I ever need to go DI from the board, it's there. I do have a DI on my amp as well, but like 99% of the time when I'm recording at home, I'll just use the SansAmp straight to the interface instead of plugging into the amp and miking it. So it's serving a very convenient purpose on my board. And with the blend for overdrive, which I have dialed in around noon-ish most times, it's adding that extra bit of like grind to my amp when driving it from the front. And I just really like the EQ it imparts. And honestly, the orange is a tiny bit on the dark side, so having the EQ on the SansAmp really helps to kind of brighten it up and bring it to the forefront for our songs that need the bass to stand out a bit more. Also, I almost forgot to mention the power supply here. I'm using the Walrus Canvas Power 5, and I spent a long time researching what power supply to get. It was between this one and the Strymon Ojai. Both were good, more than enough to fit my needs, but I ended up going with the Walrus because it's slightly slimmer, weighs less, and has a switchable volts port for the 5th output. And honestly, it matches my tuner, so that's why I went with it. But yeah, I'm enjoying how it looks, and the best part is that my board is noise free and I can turn on all my pedals with one outlet and don't have to daisy chain anything, so that is very, very nice. Okay, so now that we've got all the pedals picked out, let's build the board, and I'll do this in a time lapse and then I'll kind of talk over some thoughts while it plays. The board itself is something I built a long time ago when I was first getting into bass effects. It's just some pine that I stained and slapped some Velcro on. Very basic, it doesn't have an incline or an angle or anything, it just lays flat on the floor. Eventually I do want to get some like small rubber feet to keep it from sliding around, but so far it's been okay. And I put some dual lock on the bottom of my power supply because I know it holds tighter than Velcro, and in the future, if I do decide to incline the board and mount the power supply underneath, I can do that really easily. I've used dual lock on my guitar board to mount my power underneath for years, so I know it holds really well. I knew all the pedals would be a pretty tight fit on here, but something I didn't account for was that the power supply's transformer brick is separate from the supply itself, so it would be flopping on the floor if I didn't mount it onto the board, which thankfully, since the SansAmp has like a horizontal format, I was able to find space and mount it to the board as well, because that thing's probably a tripping hazard. The patch cables I'm using are the EBS gold flats. Don't ask me if the gold means anything because I don't know, But I've been using the same cables on my boards for like 8 years, and they've been very reliable. It's the same cables I bought 8 years ago, and like none of them have gone bad, which is crazy because I've rebuilt boards many times. Obviously I love the low profile on him, and I can cram stuff together really nicely, which is great for this board because it absolutely needed it. I definitely could have spaced things out more by mounting the power underneath and then flipping the tuner to the vertical layout, but honestly I was too lazy to go to the hardware store and find something to angle this board up, so for now I'm pretty happy everything just fits on top. Then of course I had to fumble with some power cables. I sort of wish these were right angle to right angle instead of right to straight, but it ended up being okay in the end. 5 pedals, 5 outputs is pretty nice, so thankfully I don't have to daisy chain and deal with extra cable lengths and stuff like that. And we don't have to talk about the cable management on the underside. That is a problem for future me. And now that the board's all wired up, the final test is to plug it in and see if it works, which, oh my god, thank god. Crisis averted. Nice. So that's the board. I've been using it at practice the last couple weeks, and it's been working out really great. I may end up angling it up and fitting the power supply underneath, like I said, because I am finding the Kilobyte foot switches especially to be a little too close to the others for comfort. But overall, I'm very happy with it and the sounds I've been getting from it. My band's been planning on recording an album as soon as we're able to, and we've got more than a handful of songs, so I really can't wait to get some music out there and play some live shows with this. Yeah, I'm just really excited. So that's the rundown. Thank you guys so much for watching, and we'll catch you next time.